ver la traducción, hay un icono en su pantalla que dice subtítulos. Ahí ustedes pueden ver la traducción. Okay, we're going to start. Verona, thank you very much for being with us. It is an honor to have you in this event to commemorate the International Day of Women. She's going to talk about the participation of the United Nations in justice with gender perspective, which is a very important topic for our students at the university in Baja California. But let me start by reading some lines of Verona's bio to present her. Verona works at the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women, where she serves as the focal point for several international organizations. In this capacity, she provides technical and substantive support to governments and other stakeholders to enhance understanding on the gender dimensions of climate change, biodiversity, and land degradation, and drought. In recent years, Verona's work focused on building knowledge and understanding on biodiversity and land degradation neutrality through publications and submissions. She organized, facilitated, and presented at workshops and expert meetings for focal points of the biodiversity and the desertification conventions, bringing in the gender perspectives. Prior to the United Women, Verona also worked with other United Nations agencies in Geneva, Switzerland. She was a Philippine Foreign Service officer. Verona completed her Master in International Law and Economics at the World Trade Institute in Bern, Switzerland. She lives in New York with her spouse and a son and a daughter. Welcome, Verona. Thank you very much for being with us. You can start talking to the public.
Thank you. Thank you for that very kind introduction, Dr. Rafael Velasquez. Students and faculty of the School of Law and School of Economics and International Relations, I'm honored to be speaking with you on this occasion of International Women's Day. I think it's very, very important that we raise visibility for this subject. I will focus my short talk on achieving gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls in the context of the work of the United Nations. As I was outlining what I was going to say to you today, I realized that the topic is really very broad and it could be your semester's coursework. So what I will be presenting today is more of an outline, a flavor of the work of the United Nations in mainstreaming gender perspectives in its work and in its operations. So just a quick overview. Some of you may already know the United Nations was founded in 1945. And in that context, you know, it was the context of World War II. So the main objectives for founding the United Nations was for peace, security, human rights, humanitarian emergencies, and sustainable development. The United Nations is very large body of agencies, secretariats, funds and programs, specialized agencies that carry out work across thematic areas. So we are working on peace, we're working on health, labor, children's rights, gender equality, climate change, and so many other agencies. The United Nations comprises of member states. So we have 193 members at the moment, and they work within what we call the organs of the United Nations. So we have the General Assembly, which is the main body of the United Nations. We have the Economic and Social Council. There's the Security Council and the International Court of Justice. So through these bodies, the United Nations makes laws. They set global standards, global norms and standards through resolutions, conventions, treaties. They also maintain peace and security, discuss social and environmental issues. You might have heard of the Sustainable Development Goals, and settle disputes. So this in broad strokes is the United Nations. Let me now zoom in on the goal to achieve gender balance or gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. So today we're celebrating the International Women's Day. I'm asked this question every time I come to meetings and talk about gender equality and the many ways by which we can support the achievement of gender equality. And I'm sure you've also heard these questions asked. Why do we even need to talk about gender equality? Why is that a question? Why is that an issue? Everything works fine to us. So why fix the problem when it's not broken? Is there no problem? The response based on evidence is really that there is a problem, that gender inequalities exist and they persist. We just have to look at it really closely and understand what it means for what it exactly means, gender inequality. I guess one way to look at it is to understand what gender equality is, right? For us to understand gender inequalities. Gender equality means the equal enjoyment by women and men of all ages of rights, socially valued goods, opportunities, resources, and rewards. So equality does not mean that men and women are the same, but that their enjoyment of rights, opportunities, and life chances are not governed or limited by gender. But what we see is that women and men, boys and girls in all their diversities do not have equal rights, opportunities, life chances anywhere in the world. This is a fact. Not even the countries that claim to have equality, we have not reached this gender equality. And this is because there's what we call all of these systemic inequalities perpetuated through customs, our belief systems, traditions, religion, laws, institutions, policies, you name it. And it's at all levels. So it starts from when you're born. So it's from the household and it goes through up to the global level. So there are inequalities everywhere. The institutions, laws perpetuate these inequalities. What does this mean actually? And I'm asked about this, and I think I can give an example of my specific work, let's say on climate change, or let's say women migrants. So if you look at women migrants, they face a more heightened risk of gender-based violence. You know, we know about migrants, but men migrants, women migrants, children migrants face different forms of treatment. They also have different needs. They have all different environments that affects them when they are in camps, in borders, in destination countries. So women, for example, may face specific human rights violations, including lack of reproductive mental health services, discrimination in accessing employment, social security, education. Some of them, they don't even have legal papers because they cannot get legal papers without a male companion, and so on and so on. So that's an example that I can give. And maybe just to be recent, even during the COVID-19 pandemic, we all faced our own challenges and difficulties during this period. But women who have been working and at home have definitely faced more challenges. They have to do more of the household work. They have to take care of their children on top of that, and they still have to do their work. And we don't even mention that there are, in some cases, an increase in gender-based violence, which heightens a mental and emotional burden for women. Then let's look at women's voice and leadership. So I don't know in Mexico, but we know worldwide that there have only been 21 countries with women heads of state and government, 21 countries, which means there's 119 and there's 190 countries that have not had women heads, women as a president or a prime minister. And only 13% of parliamentarians have gender equal or can claim to have gender equal representation. And the same for cabinets. At the United Nations, we don't even need to go that far. At the United Nations, in the 75th year history of the United Nations, we've only had 4 women presidents of the General Assembly. And in the representatives here in the United Nations, the missions, we call them the United Nations missions, there are only 21% headed by women. So we are not anywhere close to what we call parity. 21% is not close to 50%. That's at this rate, at the rate we're going, it will take 130 years before we reach parity. And that's really a big problem, a sad reality, and we have to address them. And this is why the United Nations is here. That being said, we don't lack rules. We don't lack policies. We have human rights standards. We have international legal instruments. There are many global commitments endorsed by governments in international conferences and processes that already lay out obligations and guidance to promote gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. We start with the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Then we have the Convention on the Elimination of all Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the CEDAW, which is like the Magna Carta of women's rights. Then there's the Beijing Platform for Action, adopted in 1995 at the World Conference on Women. We've celebrated the 25th year anniversary last year. And here it's a very, very concrete document that lays out concrete actions to help achieve gender equality. It has 12 critical areas of concern, including women in the environment, women in decision-making, in the economy, women in poverty, violence against women, you name it. It's all covered there. So what are we missing? Oh, and there's also the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This was the most recent. It was adopted in 2015. And it had a dedicated goal 5, we call it, to achieve gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. So we are not short of norms and standards. We just really need to implement these global standards and guidance at all levels. So we, at the United Nations entity on gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, do exactly this. So UN Women for short, UN Women was founded in 2010 as the lead agency in the UN to advance gender equality. So we do our work through first as a substantive secretariat of the Commission on the Status of Women. This is a body that meets every year for 2 weeks to discuss about what to do and how to advance gender equality, women's rights, and the empowerment of women. UN Women also coordinates the UN system's work on gender equality. And we follow intergovernmental process. Like myself, I follow the climate change, environment, and make sure that even in these processes, they also make sure to capture the rights of women, how to advance women's participation and leadership, and gender equality. And then through policy and program work, we do these things. So how does that translate in actual work? So I can give an example of my hat, now wearing my hat, working for the climate change process. We build knowledge. You know, if we have to convince people, we have to show them the data. We have to show them the evidence. We have to show them how things work on the ground. So we build the case through evidence. And we have experts, we gather experts to talk about the key issues. We have field offices where we collect data. We have focus group discussions, and we come up with publications and present this as key messages. Then we also have the constant work of raising visibility, doing advocacy work. You may be familiar because Mexico is a co-convener of this big forum that to celebrate the Beijing +25 I mentioned earlier, the Generation Equality Forum, which will meet in Mexico City sometime at the end of this month, virtually, of course, and maybe some in person, but very limited. So sustained outreach, advocacy, campaign, raising the visibility of issues, and building partnerships. Right? It's very important. I mean, we cannot do this alone. We have to have all of you, all of our partners. The youth, the students, you have your voice, you have your platform. So we partner with the youth, with students, with think tanks, academics, the private sector, women's groups, very, very important, youth groups also. And we provide capacity building and technical support, especially for those who are participating in meetings in intergovernmental processes, women delegates included. And these kinds of work, these kinds of interventions that I just mentioned make a difference in the context of, again, going back to climate change, in the context of climate change, my climate change work. 10 years ago, before I joined UN Women, there were 2 or 3 decisions on gender specific decisions in the context of the climate change process. Now, in 2019, of course, 2020, we didn't have a meeting, but in 2019, we had 82 decisions. So 10 years, and you realize how much of a difference it makes if you really work persistently on the ground. Even in the Paris Agreement of climate change reflects gender perspectives. Gender perspectives are also embedded in the finance mechanisms, Green Climate Fund, the Global Environment Facility. So even in the financing mechanisms of climate change, we have gender perspectives. There are more global programs that require a reflection of gender perspectives, and there are accountability mechanisms set up for gender equality. More data is being collected, more evidence is being collected. So this kind of it's a cycle that only strengthens the advocacy and the support for us to push for gender equality. So in conclusion, just to give some time for some of you if you have some questions, I would say we have taken small but incremental steps to reach to where we are now in terms of gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. But now is the time to dream big, not only because it's International Women's Day, but because it's the smart thing to do. It's time to stop wasting half of our valuable resources. The time for equal is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Verona, for this complete and interesting conference. Probably many people didn't know there is an entity in the United Nations that promotes gender equality. And it is very important, the labor that the United Nations is doing to promote this reality. Gender equality is not a domestic issue, it's an international issue. And the United Nations is doing a lot to provide this kind of knowledge. I think that's an important topic, that the United Nations is trying to build knowledge worldwide to show the data, to show the evidence that there is no gender equality in the world, and we must do something about it. Thank you very much for giving this information, these ideas that the United Nations and you have on this issue. So let's see if there is a question. Somebody wants to ask a question, you can raise your hand. You know that in Zoom you can raise the hand. And okay, Cruz Rodriguez, Hector, he's my student and I'm very proud of him. Okay, Hector, you can ask the question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello. It was a great presentation, but I do have a question though. You mentioned that no country has achieved gender equality, but I must ask, which are the closest, or at least the ones striving the hardest towards it? That's my question.
Thank you very much, Hector. Verona, are you willing to answer the question?
Sure. I don't have the ranking in front of me, but I can say outright that in terms of gender equality or achievement, the achievement of gender equality, the Nordic countries, if you know, Sweden, Finland, Iceland. I think Iceland must be the number one. But Iceland, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Austria. These are the countries that are at the top of the achievement of gender equality in terms of the rights that they provide to women and men, in terms of the programs that they have put in place, that they're putting in place for this. For example, you may be very aware that the Nordic countries are very generous in terms of their maternity leave. Like I can just be a mom every 2 years, and then for 10 years they will just allow you to enjoy, to be able to enjoy that leave. That's what I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hector. Is there another question? Maybe New Zealand is also a very an important country that is working a lot on these issues. New Zealand.
Yes, and I should say this. I don't have the specific figures, but I think it's something that may interest you to pursue. Mexico. I should commend Mexico, at least at the global level. I don't know. I'm not working in the field, but I know that at the global level, Mexico, when it comes to advocacy for gender equality, and I see it all the time. I was just in the agreed conclusions for the CSW. They're negotiating that. They're meeting next week, so they're already having informals. And Mexico is very much at the forefront of advocating for gender equality, women's rights, and women's empowerment. And even in terms of I know gender responsive budgeting, they call it. Your budgeting has to have this really concrete effort to reflect how women's rights, women's projects are built in that, and you have that. You're leading in that. So I know that there may be some realities on the ground, but at least at the global level, I know that Mexico is also leading in that. I didn't want to miss mentioning that.
Thank you very much for mentioning Mexico. Indeed, Mexico is trying to project a foreign policy in which gender equality is an important issue. However, in the domestic sphere, there is violence towards women, and we have a lot to do on this issue inside the country. Okay, Dulce, please ask your question. Dulce,
yeah. My question is that I think you mentioned that in more than 100 years we're going to have equality in our society. So my question is what we can do to reduce that number, that it doesn't have a century, or that it can be less, I don't know, 1 decade or something reality, something that is real and that we can achieve in a medium time term. Well, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Dulce. Yeah, I mean, I wish we were not talking about this issue anymore, right? Like I said in my presentation, we have the foundation, we have the global norms, we have the standards, we have treaties, we have all documents. UN Women produces guidelines after guidelines, some modules and training materials. We go to countries and help them to revise the laws so that it protects women, give rights to women. We do education. I mean, it's not just UN Women, but all other partners. Like I mentioned, this is a multi-stakeholder engagement. We build capacity, we build awareness, we make people understand how this is important, that we advance gender equality. You know, the thing is, we are very uneven, right? Uneven in terms of our understanding of why, of first of all, what is gender equality, / inequality. If you remember, there are countries that practice female genital mutilation. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. You know, there are countries that really still do things that doesn't make real sense from any angle. So we need to do more of it is education, awareness raising, changing laws, really doing things on the ground, like Rafael mentioned. You know, it's not enough to do it at the global level. There are the global norms is important because they kind of structure what has to be done, but then the real action is at the national level. And you as students, you have a lot of responsibility in this. You know, you go home to your families, talk to your parents, talk to your siblings, talk to your neighbors, to your friends. You know, on social media, you're very, very powerful now. You have your social media. Use your social media to communicate all of these voices. And maybe, like you said, maybe it's not going to be 130 years. Maybe we can aspire in 50 years or in 25 years. So that's what I would say.
Oh, thank you very much, Verona, and thank you very much for punctuality, because it's 9:30 in Tijuana, and the program was set to finish at 9:30. Thank you very much, Verona. It was a pleasure to have you. I hope it's not the only one. I hope in the future you can join us for events like this. Thank you very much. And
thank you. Yeah, it's my pleasure. And anytime, I'll make time. And this is a very important subject. And I thank you too for really raising visibility for this issue. Thank you.
Goodbye. Bien, pues